The United States has recently unveiled its national defense strategy for the year 2026, outlining its strategic priorities. The document signals a significant shift, some say, in America's defense posture, with profound implications for its alliances and the future of international security. So, is it seen as a tactical adjustment or a fundamental strategic reorientation? Here is my one-on-one conversation with Senior Colonel Zhou Bo, a retired senior colonel and researcher at Tsinghua University Center for International Security and Strategy. Senior Colonel Zhou, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, when you read the National Defense Strategy 2026 from the United States, what was the first reaction for you as a Chinese military person?
Well, it's not a surprise because I was already surprised somehow by the report. Yeah, before that, that is a national security strategy, because this national security strategy basically is in line with this follow-up report. But the language, first of all, impressed me in that it was much concise compared to all what I have read in the past. But when I was reading the national security strategy, I had the illusion that I was reading a kind of a Chinese report because it was so concise. Yeah. So this one is not a surprise at all, but you just can't help smiling when you read how the United States would describe the liberal international order as a kind of a cloud castle.
3.5% national defense of the GDP and also 1.5% for security. That is what the U.S. is asking for its allies around the world, for Europeans as well. Now, we know there's still a big space before the allies reach that threshold. But what does that say about the nature of relationship from now until the so-called 5% for the U.S. and its allies' relations?
Very simple. It means the United States doesn't want to be free-ridden by allies anymore. Yeah, and these countries are not poor countries, right? Basically, they are all the European countries, yeah, plus some other countries. So because your EU is 27, right, and NATO is 32, so there is a great overlap. But these countries really enjoy this kind of a dependency, yeah, on the United States. So, but there is a difference. Yeah, the European allies have to pay 5% from now on, but in the Indo-Pacific, I really have some doubts, about American allies.
Now, we have already seen the World Economic Forum. Many describe it as a threshold moment, as a watershed moment for the relations between two allies. They are not only in heated debates behind the scenes, but rather publicly scolding one another. And so what does that mean, particularly when we are seeing the Europeans are being asked by the U.S. to increase their national defense budget 3.5%, while at the same time the cross-Atlantic relations is experiencing some of the biggest storms, to say the least. By the way, Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, recently also suggested it is rather a laugh if the Europeans want to pursue what he described as an independent military or defense approach.
Well, definitely, President Macron's slogan will be realized. That is the European strategic autonomy. The only question is, how long does it take, right? But the point is, with the United States determined to move away from Europe and to become focused in the Indo-Pacific. So of course the Europeans have to, show the greater responsibility in their own defense. So there's no doubt about it. Yeah. So right now, I think it would be exaggerating even if we say that the Transatlantic Alliance is weakened. No, it's not being weakened. Yeah, there could be a kind of rupture. Yeah, we have to wait and see. But it's just as serious as that.
When we talk about the money, 3.5% of GDP, that's a lot. So what does that mean? Where the money goes? The U.S., according to the National Defense Strategy, has been talking about promoting the U.S. return to its position as the global arsenal. Now, Senior Colonel Zhou, will the money go directly to the United States, coming from the European economies? What does that say about another layer of relations, whether it is national defense independence or autonomy or others?
Of course, there is a question as to where would the Europeans have to buy, the arms and the weapons. Yeah, for example, France, of course, would wish, yeah, that or at least most of the European countries would buy French-made weapons, but Germany seemed to have another idea. So so we have to wait and see. But of course, the United States would wish to sell them, more weapons. One of the strategy is to say that NATO standard has to be uniform, right? And the United
Right.
States is the leader of NATO. Of course, it would insist, NATO countries buy things from United States. But sometimes there was a violation. For example, like Turkey, Turkey also, bought the Russian weapons, in defiance of Americans' pressure. But of course, they also paid a price because the United States would not sell them the most advanced, airplanes. Yeah. And again, Turkey at least was negotiating with China to buy China's air defense system, but it was boycotted because, again, United States would insist that the systems would not, meet one another. Yeah. So that is one of the barriers.
So, what is your assessment of that rupture you just described?
So many people talking about this kind of rupture to be. We're not so sure about it. I think, if possible, the countries of European Union, most of them are NATO countries as well, would still want to maintain very strong political and defense relationship with the United States. But the question is, the United States is not thinking like that. Yeah. In the two reports, the one strategic security report and the national defense report, it's made it very, very clear that the U.S. would be refocused on its own, backyard. Yeah, so that is the top priority. Then China would be the second priority, and then, in another report, that is the Indo-Pacific would come as the second priority, right? But in the defense report, China is second priority. So Europe, it is actually not that important. Yeah, in Americans' core interest. The only question is, Trump has still 3 years to go. So what might happen after Trump is gone? So normally we're going to see the swing back of the pendulum, right? But I don't believe it will be, uh, it will return to the original place. Something fundamental has changed.
But what about the other areas where the U.S. Claims to have its allies? For example, in the Middle East, the Middle Eastern countries need to play bigger role in terms of vis-a-vis Iran, for example, and the U.S. Allies in the Korean Peninsula, South Korea needs to be more responsible for dealing with North Korea, while the U.S. is providing so-called limited support. What does this all mean? Can you help us to understand from your perspective?
Yeah, America's focus, first of all, is Western Hemisphere. The second thing is the Indo-Pacific. The reason is very simple. A lot of people would believe that the United States want to stay in the Indo-Pacific to contain China, and never buy that. Yeah, I believe this is because they like us realized how Indo-Pacific is center of gravity and how it is booming economically. So the United States also want to catch the train that is moving fast. Talking about the Middle East, of course, the United States cannot move away from Middle East, contrary to many other people's argument. I don't believe the United States can actually move away from the Middle East simply because of one country, Israel. So long as Israel is still there, the United States just cannot walk away because of so many things. One is, Jewish influence in the United States. But when it comes to South Korea or North Korea, South Korean Peninsula, all these things you mentioned, I think it is made clear in Americans' national defense strategy that they want to maintain a strong presence, yeah, with the support of allies to do what? To deter China. But one word is interesting in the report that is called the balance of power. I really have read balance of power, described by the United States between China and the United States. That is something new for me because they have made it clear that they do not want to, humiliate China, but vice versa. Yeah. So in the description, there is a kind of a balance. But then, how do you explain that they want to maintain the forward military presence? Yeah, to do deterrence against China. That means actually they are still, yeah, making the efforts, trying to curb China's growing influence. But whether they can do it or not, that is another thing. My central argument is if there is the worst scenario of a conflict between China and the United States, there aren't many people standing on either side.
You're watching World Insight. So, what could the defense strategy mean for the already complex relationship between China and the United States and for the stability in the Asia Pacific region? Let's listen in to more conversations I have with Senior Colonel Zhou Bo. Senior Colonel Zhou, having said that, though, let's go to China-U.S. That is really the underlining of the overall national defense strategy. Your reading of that, the most obvious, the so-called the first chain island. What does the description in the national defense strategy say to you about the nature of relationship, particularly on some of the most thorny issues?
Well, I like the word you mentioned, nature, because yeah, this is the fundamental thing, right? During Biden administration, it is just a competition, which actually is left over from the first Trump administration. But during Trump's second term, his attitude is very interesting because you see in the National Defense Report, Taiwan issue is not mentioned at all. You have to imagine why is that. What I would say is, yeah, Trump's attitude toward China seems quite different. Yeah, in that he seldom talked about China, and he talked about how he respected Chinese leaders and how he would like to how the United States wants to maintain a good relation with China, and he talked about how he would come to visit China. So all these attitudes are actually in stark contrast to what yeah he is doing elsewhere. So this is something very interesting. We have to see whether this is a real change in this kind of power, yeah, shift or what. But clearly, yeah, I see more respect from the United States regarding China as a rising power. I think this kind of feeling is even strengthened through Trump's own dealing with China when he tried to, bash China with tariff. Certainly, China is not the first to blink, right? And China's attitude matters a lot to the rest of the world. Yeah, because he's bashing the whole world. So in a way, China takes the lead in fighting back against the Americans' bully, and that means a lot. Yeah, for China because China definitely is become more confident.
We have seen several new areas. For example, the Golden Dome being described, the anti-missile defense system, and also the outer space competition. All of these have becoming new areas in which we are likely to see power competition. But how much is that competition likely to be an important indicator of the overall strategic relationship and defense relationship, for example, between the United States and China, and also between the United States and some other powers such as Russia?
Well, basically, nobody I have talked to in the United States believes that it is a realistic objective. Golden Dome would remind you of the Star War, right? Of
Yes.
Ronald Reagan. Yeah, that war, of course, was never completed. So this one you could take it as another attempt to build this kind of things. But technically speaking, it is too difficult, and it will take a long time, and it would invite astronomical figure, yeah, of spending. So I think all these people might just want to wait, yeah, till Trump is gone, and then this is the whole thing is forgotten, yeah. But the point is, if they try, yeah, or because they have talked about it, if they try on it, that would definitely be a destabilizer of the strategic stability, yeah, because you're just trying to develop a kind of offensive capability, because this so-called defensive capability basically are the same thing, like
Mm.
offensive capabilities. So of course China and Russia would not stand idly by. We would also develop our own means, yeah, to break such kind of shield. So that is why in space this kind of a competition is already going on. But you see, in space, basically China and Russia's position are that we should not place any weapons, yeah, in outer space. And I fully
Mhm.
agree to this idea in that don't we have enough trouble on Earth? And why should we play weapon on space? And if we place weapon on space, what is the purpose? To strike
Mhm.
back on Earth, our own homeland. Could another folly of mankind be more monumental than this, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and the point is, you already have a kind of military superiority, yeah, in terms of
Right.
military strength. It's not that you are weak; that you have to develop your superiority in space. So if everybody agrees that we do not, place any weapon in space, isn't it good for all of us?
At the same time, we are seeing other signs related to what we just discussed. Uh, Greenland and also Panama Canal. Both of these words are being mentioned in the national defense strategy.
I think they are just a fantasy and hallucination of the United States. Yeah, to put it briefly, because okay, talking about Panama Canal, right? Yeah, well, it is just under the nose of the United States, and because of the intelligence capabilities, they definitely know what is going on every day in the strait. Yeah, China's military is not trying to control the Panama, Canal, and
Mhm.
in Greenland, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
I was even approached by Danish journalists asking me why Trump is so interested in Greenland, because he said that we have a Russian, Russian military and Chinese military there, but it's not true. I said, yeah, that's exactly the situation. So how can I know why he would talk about that? It doesn't make any sense.
China has also its 15th five-year plan. Of course, that is mainly related to development and economic growth. But at the same time, China's military has its approach as well for progress. How does that likely to interact with what the U.S. has put forward as the 2026 National Defense Strategy? And how much will the interactions of the militaries between the two sides help both sides to clarify even furthermore their strategic goals and their tactical approaches?
Well, let me answer the second part of your question first, because in the Americans report, it talks about how it should actually make more confidence building measures with China, yeah, to prevent the crisis, accidents. I think that would be welcomed by the Chinese side, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I think it is in our common interest, yeah, to behave professionally, yeah. I talk about this word professionally in that when you talk about trust building is a precondition, it's actually very difficult for Americans to accept, because they always tell you the lesson learned from Cold War is not like that. Yeah. During the Cold War, the two enemies were interacting with one another. They do not have trust at all, but still they could develop a litany of compatibility measures, especially in nuclear field. So I definitely believe that China-US should, go down the road. Then on the first part, the question I often think is if the United States, keep upgrading its defense expenditure, should China follow suit or not? My answer is I don't think we will do that because you see, if you look at the Chinese defense budget in the last 4 decades, I think it is rather stable, and it tells you a lot of things. Why? Because people lie sometimes, yeah, but your defense budget would not lie. It tells you, it tells people how you really think about yourself, your environment, your adversaries. So Chinese defense budget is on a steady rise. That is because Chinese economy is basically, still healthy. So we can afford to spend our own money, but it is proportional. You have never seen a drastic increase in Chinese, defense spending, unlike what we have seen, in Japan or in India. Yeah, I think this kind of rationality, would still persist.